Hey guys, as you may know, Felix Frey and I are doing a weekly podcast about pike fishing or predator fishing in general actually. And we recently did an episode with my buddy Frans van de Putte and we talked about deadbait fishing. And to demonstrate and illustrate what we're actually talking about, I thought it would be cool to put some video underneath the podcast itself, and I uploaded it on YouTube. So I really hope you enjoyed this short video podcast thing. More cool projects coming up, so make sure to like this and make sure to like and subscribe and put on the notification button, which is somewhere below here. Cool stuff coming up, so stay tuned guys. Cheers.
Okay guys, welcome to another episode of the Fish Podcast. It's Felix here with Sean, and today we have a special guest for you. We have Frans van der Putte with us at this podcast episode, and it's super cool to start this episode out, and we're gonna talk deadbait fishing.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. We talked about it in the last episode about bringing a guest over. Deadbait fishing is hot at the moment. Temperatures are dropping. It's just the perfect time to have a podcast and have an expert with us to talk about deadbait fishing. Frans has been doing it for several years in the Netherlands. I think he is one of the persons who put the static deadbait fishing on the map in the Netherlands when it really kicked off, I think maybe 10 years ago or so. And yeah, especially with his gigantic fish he caught last year at the end of 2017, that 20 kilo pike. We'll talk a bit about that later on in the episode.
Frans, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. The first podcast for me, so yeah.
Hopefully not the last.
Yeah.
We'll get you warmed up. I know you're a common thing in Sean's videos, and you two guys are like, we call it in Swedish X and Kex, best brothers going together fishing, doing a lot of projects together. It's super fun to have you
X
on.
and Kex.
X and Kex. You never heard it? Have not Andy never told you about it? Or yeah, it's so deadbait fishing, I guess it's more of a scene for the more southern parts of Europe, and us in Sweden, I would say it's quite a small amount of people doing it or doing properly, but I think you could definitely grow if you look at the possibilities you have while targeting pike with that kind of method. But I guess I want to just dive into the poor basics of it. What do you need to start with? What should you think of? And what type of equipment do you need to do this? So just give me some information.
Yeah, well, for me, I started out with just a simple rod and reel. You have the Abu Garcia, the 6501 series with the rattle.
Yeah.
And the first time for me was just a simple piece of lead and a leader with 2 trebles on it. Just stick it into a bait fish, as simple as that, and then cast it out. Of course, there's a lot of boats coming by in the Netherlands, so you use something like a back lead to keep the line straight over the ground, and it doesn't have any propellers coming nearby. And of course, deadbait fishing was very big, or is very big in the UK and Ireland.
Yes.
And a buddy of mine, about 11, 12 years ago, just went out with his carp kit and started off this way. And the first time he went fishing like this, he had a really good session with more than 10 pikes. And that's where he invited me. And of course, after the first time, I was hooked.
I remember the first time that Frans invited me as well to do it, and I was also a bit skeptical because when I fished with deadbait, it used to be from the boat, like really, really slow trolling or like float trolling, the way you call it in Sweden.
Yeah.
And we usually did it in harbors and such and places like that. And that was the way to go for me, and I had just, results were just fine. And I didn't feel the urge or the need to do some deadbait fishing like Frans did until he finally convinced me to do it one more time. And then he got me hooked as well, because it's really a cool way to fish and it's really effective as well.
Yeah, I remember you being very skeptical the first time. And a fun thing was the first few hours we didn't even get a bite. And then when the sun went down and you were like, oh, shitty way of fishing, boring and stuff like that. And then this massive 115 pike took
I need to look it up because I'm doing a like a YouTube coverage from this one. I'm gonna put some photos and video in it just to give it some graphics about the stuff we're talking about. And I'm gonna look up that old photo of the 1m15 pike because we caught it near some urban structures with an old shed, and we wrote an article for a Dutch website. And the guy we knew, we just photoshopped a wanted poster on one of the in the background. So it's like a small Easter egg in that photo. So that was pretty cool.
That's nice.
Pipa.
So when you do this, I guess the key thing is also bait. What do you use? Do you use like roach, or doesn't matter, or how do you do this? Now, do you go catch them first, or can you buy them in Holland, or how do you do this?
Yeah, deadbait fishing from the shore is a lot like carp fishing, and bait is also a very big thing among carp fishermen. I'm not a carp fisherman, but with piking, I experimented a lot with bait. Mm-hmm. For the first few times, I thought maybe that freshwater fish like roach or brim were good bait fish because the pike would naturally find it in its habitat. Mm-hmm. But what's really hard with freshwater fish is that they have a really tough skin. And when you try to hook a pike, they will definitely take it. The hooks don't come out really easy. And you're trying to set the hook with that bait on your trebles.
Yeah.
So that's when I just looked up some UK literature, and I came up with sardines.
Okay.
So this is a saltwater fish. The pike doesn't eat it in its natural habitat, but it's a really fatty fish, and it almost falls apart when you handle it.
Yeah.
You can buy it in those bags where they are 10, 11, 12 in a bag, separately frozen. And the key thing is to put the trebles in when it's still frozen, and then you cast it out in the water, and the frost slowly gets out, and then you have a really soft lure. So you're with the lead, when the pike takes the bait, they can just take it and it doesn't feel any resistance. Mm-hmm. So of course I started off only with a rattle and some those red and white balls to show that you've got a bite. But now I'm using those optonic stuff like every carp fisherman would use.
Like electronic stuff, like that gives alarm.
Yeah. I'm really fond of those Delkim old school ones, the TXI. Especially when you just walk away from your rods for a little bit, and then you have the sounder box in your pocket.
Yeah.
It sounds like a real carp angler.
Yeah. As close you can become a carp angler without becoming a carp angler.
Once you get the Delkims, you're really like a carp angler, man.
Do you use them, Sean?
I use the cheaper ones. I really, especially when you're fishing on multiple spots, not on multiple spots if you go, but if you spread out your rods even more, and you can't keep optical contact with your rods, then it's really good to have a sounder box or something, in your pocket. Or usually we set up camp, fish multiple structures or depths and areas, and then we're allowed to use 3 rods per person on most waters. On some waters you're only allowed to use 2 rods per person, but when you're fishing with 2 or 3 guys, then you can put like 6 or 9 rods out, and you try to divide them on the entire area to fish as a wide area as possible. And but you want to, it's a social thing as well. So you want to sit together and still have the ability to get a good bite indication, and that's where the sound of the optonics combined with sounder box come together, because we set up camp, we set up our rods, and then we put the three sounder box close to each other. And in that way, you can sit close to each other and not have to pay that much attention to your rods, but still have that audio indication when you get a bite. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And of course, there's the extra feature of maybe putting up a tent and go to sleep.
That's possible as well. But to get back on the bait fish again, because you mentioned about the hardness of freshwater fish, and you use sardines, but you don't lose any mackerel, right?
I tried mackerel, and pike obviously love it, but mackerel as well has a really, really tough skin.
Yeah.
And we're Dutch. Mackerel is more expensive than sardines. So,
you can't spoil those pike enough.
Just joking, but what I was telling you about the sardines, they're just really easy to use, and when you set the hook, you totally rip that sardine apart, and then you don't have that bait fish dangling on your trebles, but you just go on for a straight hit and set the hook.
Yeah.
What about
most of the times?
So the fun thing, by the way, about this also, we talked about it before, Felix, in the previous episode of the podcast. You notice that a lot of people, I think it's a marketing thing, to be honest, but about match the hatch, you need to put a bait that looks like what the pike are feeding on that particular water system or lake. There are no sardines in the Netherlands. There are no mackerels in the Netherlands, but they take them like there's no tomorrow. So it proves once again that
don't match that.
No, you don't have to. Not at all. Not at all.
I think it's very interesting. It's cool to see what people, what's available and how to start. And I just feel, we do a lot of ice fishing, and it's I think it would be if you would adapt your ice fishing towards summer for specific waters. I would say you're quite close, though. That ice fishing generally uses shorter rods, less good equipment, but still the dead bait version, and sometimes even a live bait, sending them live roaches or whatever. But sardines is a cool thing, especially when you talk about the texture, because I feel like that is a very big problem, especially what I can feel towards ice fishing, that you lose a lot of fish, or that they steal the roach, or when you do the hook you just miss them out or whatever. So sardine, looking at the texture of the fish wherever you live and what you can find, I think it's a super cool tip to really acknowledge and think about. Sardines for the win.
Yes,
Exactly,
sardines
yeah.
for the win. So I think I don't know what availability in Sweden is for sardines, but I think you can get them anywhere basically. Or
And
else
even
just-
in the Netherlands now, you even got certain web shops that are actually selling bait fish. So like you would normally order a pack of lures, now they're actually selling lures. So, and when you order a couple of them, you get a small call that material, isolating material, like a foam cooler. And they put it straight in front of your door and deliver sardines and mackerels and stuff, which are obviously way more expensive than what you normally would buy them at, like a store where you can actually buy fish for consumption. Or I usually go to the market, like a local marketplace, and just buy a whole bunch of them, prepare them, put them in the freezer, and make sure they're ready for the next fishing session.
I think that's smart. I'm looking here online if I can find them on some shop or something.
Sardine.
It's mostly cod or whatever. We'll see. Sardines would be cool.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any saltwater species that's really common in Sweden that are useful for dead bait fishing.
Yeah, herring is good as well, but quite tough skin sometimes. But herring is, if you can get a lot of herring, of course, it's super cool bait to use as well.
Yeah, you can even make a trip out of it in the summer and catch them yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely. But sometimes fishing is, you don't have that, it's time, and how much time do you have to put down to be able to go out, and how much time they have preparation. And fishing, sometimes it's nice when it's easy, or you can have it around, have it in the freezer, or just buy it at the local supermarket or at the fishing, fish market or whatever. So
yeah, but to me, that's what I like about the sardines as well, and or herring or any other saltwater species. You can easily, fill up I got an old freezer at my balcony over here. I just filled it up, and I always got a relatively fresh supply of bait fish in my freezer. And when I want to go out dead bait fishing, I just get them out of the freezer.
Or on Saturday night for some evening snack, you can just.
No, I don't know. We're not Russian, so.
It's cool you're talking about that, Sean, because it's cool to talk about the myth that bait fish needs to be really, really fresh. That's the best.
Yeah.
Was the bait on your 20 kilo? Was it a fresh bait fish?
No.
It was an old sardine. Old.
It was in a bag. I was almost through my supply, and that bag was lying in my fridge for like 3 years or so.
Maybe that
wasn't even legal. It wasn't even legal to sell it anymore.
No. Okay.
But it liked it.
So
I've got a lot of big pike, by the way. Fun story about that as well. I've got a lot of big pike on sardine or herring. That the sardine or herring has been put in the freezer back and out. Defrosted, frosted, defrosted, defrosted, to a point where you actually think it's starting to decompose in a way that you think this can't be healthy to put in the water anymore, and this can't catch any fish anymore because it smells. It's completely, it's an abomination to put on the bait. But yeah, it works. Even the more it smells, the better it works. I think actually it attracts more fish. Yeah.
That's my opinion as well. So
yeah. I like it when you get a lump of herring or sardine, which blood coming out, and the blood is frozen again. I got like a big bowl of like chum, like they would use with fishing for sharks and such. It gives such a big trail of scent and shit, and yeah, it's really cool.
You can see the oily stuff coming out when you just dip it in the water. That's the best.
That's the best thing. In the Netherlands, Frans, you have like a common saying that when the frost has finally arrived, it's time for deadbait fishing. What's your take on that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, really nice of you to mention, Sean. I don't think pike feel the temperature that much as we warm-blooded humans do. I think it's just the course of time, the length of the day, and of course a little bit the water temperature. But I think it's just the pikes noticing that the season is changing and they have to start fattening up for winter.
Yeah, I do think so too. Because if you look at the season now, I don't know how it is in Sweden now at the moment, Felix. But in the Netherlands, I was out there today on the water, and water temperature was still like between 10 and 11 degrees, which is for like half November is pretty insane. But to me, if I see people fishing and catching fish on deadbait at the moment, it's like there's like every single November it's kicking off like it normally does as well. And there's no frost at the moment at all.
No, it's super warm. It's quite strange, and our pike fishing now is not as it used to be in this area, because we still have 7 to 8 degrees temperature in the water, warm outside, no cold mornings, and we feel like the summer with the heat has pushed everything forward. Because it feels like everything, when you recall, okay, last November we had this condition, it was really good. It feels like everything is pushed forward, and we'll see whenever, it's because a different thing.
Yeah, I had a drop right in temperature because I saw the photos from friends of mine from Stockholm who sent me a lot of snow and stuff, and
it was just like a couple of days, but then we had some super high temperatures in mid-October. And since then it's been quite stable with between 5 to 10 degrees Celsius each day, and no super cold mornings or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's been actually different, and fish. I think everyone feels like the fishing or this summer has affected fishing. So looking at new strategies or new techniques in order to maybe do good or improve your fishing game or do something else. I think this type of fishing could be something. And when I think about it, where do you use it? Because if you're out pelagical fishing, I guess you don't do it on the big deeps. Is it in the rivers? When do you turn to this fishing rather than trolling or casting?
Yeah, no, it's good you mentioned this, because I was going to tell you about deadbait fishing. For me, to be super honest, is always the second choice of fishing. I like lure fishing for big pikes the most, and after that comes deadbait fishing. I've caught them on deadbait as early as the first week of September. Mm-hmm. But of course, this is really a good time to be fishing with lures.
Yeah.
So usually I'm in late October starting with deadbaiting, or when I just don't feel like taking out the boat, when I've had three straight days of boating behind me, and I'm just like, well, let's relax for a bit and catch fish. Then I'm going deadbaiting. And spot-wise, the best thing to look for is big open water where there's I don't know the English word for it, a sort of shallow trench where fish is migrating through. So
what do you call it? Like a transition zone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you have like a river coming out to a big lake, with some deep holes, and you have pike moving up and down the river into the lake, you want to be in the spot where those fish are migrating. So I don't like to be in a spot just in the middle of a big lake and just throw out my baits into the middle of nowhere. Obviously, I've tried it and I've caught fish, but I like those spots where the fish are migrating. Obviously, the big pike aren't in one spot all day. This is of course a myth as well. And the ones that take the deadbait straight off the floor, the bottom of the lake, they are looking for it all day long, and that's the way they just gather their meal, I guess. So you want when you're carp fishing, this is my theory, the carps are swimming around and they find your bait, and I think pike is very similar, but you want to be in a spot where they have to move past your bait.
Yeah,
spots
exactly.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. You can see that on the waterwolf cameras, because we have been using a lot of cameras while using this technique. And you see a lot of fish just swimming by. You see roaches migrating in and out of those places. You see a lot of perch swimming by as well. And the fun thing also is that you see a lot of crayfish and stuff on the bottom as well.
Have you learned a lot using the cameras? Has that been an important tool for you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
When did you start using them?
Like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe.
Yeah. And when was the first time you just had a wow experience? Did you see a big fish swimming by, or had a good take? Something you remember?
Well, my first wow moments were in Denmark, when I had more strikes on the cam than on the lure.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy as well. All kinds of theories about why they're doing that. I had one of my really eye openers was, we always tend to think that pike can be very sensitive when it comes to deadbait, or leaders and stuff. I'm gonna ask Frans about what his setup is, but I had a situation where I dropped my deadbait with a waterwolf camera in front of it in like a big patch of vegetation on the ground, like dying vegetation, and I was fishing with Frans actually, and we thought we saw like a nibble on the tip, but it just didn't come through. And it happened again and again and again, and we thought maybe it's a line swimmer or something, like roaches or something swimming against your line. but we used the sinker on the bottom, so that couldn't be the case.
Yeah.
So it was a bit weird. And then eventually we thought it was a take because it took a bit more line, and then we didn't set the hook, but we could see the teeth mark in the bait. And then we looked back on the Woodwolf camera, and it turned out that it was a big pike that was trying to get that sardine and just ripping it out of the weeds, ripping it out of the vegetation, but it just couldn't come off because the trebles were stuck in the vegetation.
No.
And we're just pulling it and pulling it and pulling it. It didn't give up, and then he pulled it out, dropped it again, picked it back up one more time, and then eventually we didn't hook it. But that was, for me, was really an eye-opener, because we talked about pike being sensitive and why they sometimes sniff around, why they huff and puff against the bait, why they pick it up and drop it. Yeah, man, you can see it. They just puff at it. You can also, I'll put in the video, I'll put, when we do a YouTube coverage.
Videos that you recommend to the listeners
to
look at? Can you find them on your channel, the white
Yeah, we can find on the White Label YouTube channel. I'll put this podcast on YouTube as well. But on the Fish podcast, I think you can put in the description a couple of links, I think, Felix.
Yeah, if you send me the links, I'll put them in, no problem.
Let's put them in there as well, because you can learn a lot about pike behavior. But this pike in particular just didn't give up, and he didn't care that the bait was stuck. It was unnatural as hell, but he didn't care. He just wanted that bait. But that reminds me of the video from the Freewater Picture guys, from the pike trying to eat the grayling from the plastic bag.
Yeah.
Such unnatural behavior, but still, pike keep amazing us. That's the fun thing.
Yeah.
But they're not all this crazy aggressive. The 20 kilo pike comes swimming by. I thought it was like 14 times before he took it.
Jesus.
Over a span of 2.5 hours.
Luckily, you didn't move the bait and go away. Imagine looking at the camera, knowing that you moved that bait away, took a new spot, or gave up. Jesus Christ! No one get it.
I don't. With this way of fishing, I don't like moving from spot to spot. I really choose this tactic to just sit and wait. And when I want to be active, I just take the boat and go lure fishing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So when we're talking about it, can you just give us some information about this fish and what happened that day when you caught this big fish and some of the preparations of, reaching the goal of catching a 20 kilo pike, because I guess there's been a lot of knowledge and a lot of preparations to come there when you eventually hit the jackpot. But it was not just a jackpot. It was, hours and hours of fishing before you found that big one.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of obvious spots in the Netherlands where I started out dead baiting. And a lot of people trolling by with their lures, and they saw me sitting there thinking I was a carp fisherman. And later on, of course, some pictures on websites and the first social medias at the time, of course, people started recognizing me.
Yeah.
And they started doing the same. The pike in these spots come back every year, and you catch them, and you see they have grown, and they're like, oh, it's 115 now. Oh, it's 117 now. Oh, nice. And you start giving them names and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was getting really, really tired of this, and so I just set my goal of finding a lake where there's no fishermen at all, and you just sit there all by yourself, knowing that there's monster pikes.
And how did you know that it was monster pikes? What did you look at? Did you have any rumors or any tips, or was it just looking at the map, or how did you know that there was a potential 20 kilo pike in that lake?
It's of course rumors, pictures you have seen from the past, knowing that certain lakes like these connected to big rivers hold big fish.
Yeah.
And it's really fun. It's also stories that people fishing for coarse fish told me, like there's a pike snatching their brim and stuff like that. So other guys I knew, they just told me, well, you have to go and sit there. That's a really good spot. Yeah, I don't fish for pike, but there's a pike taking my roach every time I'm trying to reel it in.
That's a good tip. That's a nice one.
So, but of course
They fed it well for you. Prepared it.
yeah. Of course, there's a lot of more things you have to look at. I don't like to focus on one water in particular, so I just move around a lot and get to know waters like 80% and then move on and come back maybe 5 years later. So
Yeah.
I had this specific place in my mind for a while. And my buddy Joshua, he's quite the deadbait fan. He's not waiting for lure season to end. He wants to deadbait all the time. And we just focused on being there, and I just scouted with the boat while lure fishing, knowing where the bait fish was. And of course, there's combine that with all the rumors of big pike. And we sat there like 5 days, I guess. We had one really monstrous, really fat 112 pike.
Okay.
And that was the only strike we had, but I knew there could be more. And there was more.
It was more. So, what happened that day when you caught it? Was it in the beginning of the day? Was it in the end of the day? How did it play out?
Yeah, well, it was December. It was cold AF, so to say.
Yeah.
And we started in the early morning, which is never a fun thing to do when it's December. So we went fishing anyways, and the rods were set in the dark, and nothing really happened all day long. So my buddy Joshua decided to go to the store. So he went to the store and just wanted to buy some snacks, groceries, so we could fill ourselves with some fat and sugar to get rid of the misery of not catching fish in the cold.
Yeah, that's nice.
And around, I guess, 2:00 in the afternoon, he had a really soft nibble on one of his rods, and then it went away. And like 10 minutes later, it was a really soft like. I'm just trying to consider maybe it's a crab or a crayfish eating the bait. But I decided to try and set the hook, and the rest is history, so to say.
The rest is on video.
Yeah.
The rest is on video. How big was it?
Yeah, it was only 122 and 20.3 kilogram.
Jesus Christ.
Yep, pretty
But
damn
so
insane.
fat.
Yeah, it was. It's really stupid to say for a 122 pike, but it was short.
Yeah.
Considering the weight and looking at this head, more like a pig or a carp than a pike.
Yeah. Insane fish, and just such a cool experience, doing that. And catching a fish like that, do you have any new goals to set? Do you feel like you're finished, or what do you aim for now?
Yeah, there's always the aim of catching another one like that. What I would really like to do is catch one like this on lures.
Yeah.
Like in October, or maybe try slow trolling in November with really big lures, trying to catch it on lure. But as a fisherman, Felix, you might as well know
I know
that it's never enough. You
never
always
enough.
want to catch another one.
Yeah, but it's cool, I would say fulfilling like a method that, okay, now I have done everything, my goal of deadbait fishing has come to my highest aim ever, and now you can move on, you know, trolling or casting is my next game to reach that high end, and you can just continue to push yourself into trying new tactics or new methods in evaluating catching these big fish, in triggering them through different ways. And you know, I never had a pike on deadbait fishing if you don't count, you know, ice fishing. So it would be just cool to catch my first pike, just normal deadbait fishing when it's summer or fall. And you know, it's just cool to start out. And I would say, you two guys, you have a lot of experience. If there's a new angler or someone like me who's not done deadbait fishing on the normal seasons, what would you recommend? What you give the best 3 tips to be successful?
Tip number 1: go to the spots you feel confident with.
Yeah.
Where you know there's pike and where you've had success with other methods.
Yeah.
Tip number 2: don't give up too easily.
Buy snacks.
People no, but people tend to see guys like Sean or me on Instagram with only big pikes and stuff like that, but they often forget that we also have blank sessions like the big one on the YouTube channel. It costs like 5 or 6 blank sessions to get this one. And of course, there's a really happy Frans in a movie with a really fat pike.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you focus for. But start off small.
That's the thing as well, you know, when you aim for big pike, especially super big pike, like the one you caught, you have to accept the fact that you're gonna blank a couple of times. So you don't, and you have to look at not from like on individual sessions, but you have to look at like one big project, and like one session that you blank is just part of the bigger plan. I mean, it's all in the game. You need to accept the fact that there will be days that you won't catch anything. That's it. That's how it is.
Yeah.
People don't need to feel sad about it.
Depending on you, when you say targeting these bigger fish, is the technique different, or is it the spots that you would say is different? Do you use bigger bait fish or bigger sardines, or rig with bigger hooks, or how do you different and target those big fish?
It's just the lakes you try, and if you just go to a smaller lake or like in the Netherlands, polder, there's of course a big pike as well, but there's a lot of small ones.
Yeah,
I try
snatch everything.
Yeah, and what I think is most interesting is these lakes where there's not a lot of pike, but when you catch one, it's like when you hear the delkim beeping, then you know this is a big one.
Yeah.
And talk about what we talked about a few moments before, like is it ever finished? No, because when you've caught a fish like this on a certain lake, then you know that maybe on another lake there's a fish like that as well, and that's where the challenge lies for me.
That's cool. That's super interesting. And what kind of rods do you prefer? Is it long rods? Is it short rods? Are they stiff? Are they soft? What do you need to know?
Yeah, I just tend to use normal carp rods, but really heavy ones. They're like 3.5 meters long and 3 3.25. Well, how do you go? LB.
Yeah,
LBS, 3.5
Yeah.
pounds. Yeah.
3.5. So, and that's not for landing the big fish, but that's for putting away the bait.
Yeah.
And
do you have any models you can recommend? Sean, what do you use?
I don't know the exact type, but I got some from Akuma, with big Akuma bait runners. That's the word on it. You want to use a bait runner setup. That's the easiest way to do. But I had an interesting discussion with Frans as well about Frans using his carp setup with his delkims in his rock pot, and I have a setup like that as well. But we talked about Jesper, another good fishing buddy of mine, who's a bit, stubborn at some point, and he basically uses a really simple setup. He uses his Savage Gear custom Predator rods, which are 240 grams casting weight, and he just used those for setting out the herring or a sardine with the 2 sinkers on it, and just a clicker on it and some small bite indication on the line. It's like fishing hillbilly style. It's so basic, but it works as well. But the only downside is you need to keep optical contact with your fishing rods, and that's not possible in every single situation. So I use both actually. I was a bit, reluctant to use the setup that Jesper was using, but in certain situations I switched all the way, especially when I'm out with the boat fishing. And I want to do a combination of trolling, casting, and deadbait fishing. I just, turn my rods in like an instance into deadbait rods with the setup that Jesper has been using, and that's a really accessible setup for a lot of people. Just
you don't have to buy any new stuff. You just need to buy some
you don't have to buy. No. Yeah, buy some sardines. Get a good setup, and I'll ask Frans about the treble setup in a minute. But just get a good setup where you can put a sardine on, put a small sinker on, put another small sinker on, just to keep the when you've cast it out at the top of your rod, so you can put the line straight over the bottom. And that's it. And just make sure you have a reel, like a baitcaster reel with a clicker, with a rattler or a clicker, like any auditive alarm indication, and something that you can put like like an optical bite in an optical bite indication. I just put like a small, it's comparable to a float, which you can just click on your line and it goes up and down. That's the easiest way to do it. Yeah.
Old school red and white ball.
Exactly. Old school stuff. Yeah. Well, talking about the trebles and stinger setup. What's the rig you're commonly using, Frans?
Yeah, of course it's just extra long because Pike have the time to inspect the bait and take it, and of course you're fishing long distance sometimes, so. You don't recognize a bait instantly. So some of them just grab it and they keep hold of it. That's again something the water wolf taught us. Yeah. Some of them are playing around with it for 10 minutes before you get an actual optical or audible bait detection. But I like the stuff called Flexonite. It's Flexonite leader. It's 47 strands steel wire. When the pike grabs your lure, it just moves very easily and it's not really stiff. So, yeah, of course, not all pikes are that sensitive, but it's just like the feeling of doing your absolute best material-wise of catching that big one. Mm-hmm. I like to tend to use really sharp hooks, like the owners, the blue ones. I don't know what model it is. It's the N ones, I guess, and then size 1 or 1.0.
Okay, so quite small.
Yeah, quite small. And for UK deadbait standards, that's really humongous.
They shouldn't see my setup with the 2 O's or 3 O's, but I'm above that. Yeah, it's really small, man. I remember the setups from back in the days, where you read articles about deadbait fishing. What's the size that you're normally using, Frans? You know what it is? It looks like stuff you would put on a salmon hornet.
It's true. It's like a 4 or a 6. Yeah.
Oh man, that's so small.
That's crazy. So, and we use like 5 O's fishing pelagically for pike, or sometimes 7 O.
7 O's underneath the 40 centimeter trout.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a big difference, but it's nice when it's easy. You can you probably have some small hooks lying around for some small baits that you don't use anymore. If you want to just tie up a rig, use some fluorocarbon, I guess, and take your own normal pike rod, just go through the supermarket, get some good fish and try it out. It's easy, and sure. It could be the potential method bringing you a new personal best. I think it's
True.
super cool, and especially for those waters that are hammered quite hard with certain techniques, the key thing could be coming with something else, and that could be the trigger point for that type of lake.
Yeah, it's true. And also a thing to consider is people fishing with side floats. What do you do when you're done with fishing and you have those smelly fish lying around in a bucket after a long day of fishing?
Yeah.
You throw them overboard.
Yeah.
Because you want fresh ones.
Yeah.
The ones you throw overboard, they don't go to waste. They will be eaten.
Yeah.
So especially in lakes that are fished more often.
Yeah.
This technique could really work.
Definitely. Feed the fish to become bigger. Grow your PCB.
Yeah.
That's
You
really
can feed them.
Yes, it's like carp anglers, exactly. Instead of boilies, you're actually feeding your pike with saltwater fish because they're more fat.
Yeah.
You should buy some salmon and just put it in the water to get the pike growing.
Yeah.
Hey, don't
or you
give
just
away
fish
the
them,
secret.
man.
Yeah, what the heaviest fish from Sweden, the record comes from Vättern, right?
What's the
biggest, the Swedish record when it comes to weight.
Yeah, that's Vättern, yeah. And they have Arctic char, they eat Arctic char and salmon and trout. So that's a good dinner for them. They're super fat fish, so that's when they grow fat. 20 kilo plus, if you want to have the best chance of getting fat fish in Sweden, it's definitely Vättern. And those, the most successful people are trolling there. Both with artificial lures, but also with roaches and stuff.
Float trolling,
yeah, and it's super effective because the body water is very big, but those pike know what you want, and that's probably some of the best areas we can catch a 20 kilo in Sweden.
Yeah.
Not far from me. Maybe I should go there.
You got a new mission for next winter.
Yeah,
if it stays warm like this, then you could keep it up the entire winter.
Yeah, I will invite you guys and tag along with you. You can show me. I can show you the spots, and you can show me the technique, and maybe we get some nice fish.
I hear a deadbait session on Vättern coming up.
Yeah, that would be super. Maybe live broadcasting it as well. That would be super cool, doing it from the water.
That would be super cool. Yeah. All right. Cool.
Guys, I think it's cool. I think we should end it here. And if any of you listeners enjoyed this, let us know. Give us some comments. If you have some special questions for Frans, hit him up on Instagram, Frans van der Putte. Me, Felix Frey Fishing, and Sean Wit NL, always this Netherlands ending on his name, not going away.
No, that's not going away, man. The bastard isn't responding. So would the real Sean Wits please stand up and just give me a call, give me my account.
Yeah.
And guys, by the way, if you have any suggestions for any guests coming up, let us know. We have Tobias Stuurman coming up next week, and we'll be talking about catfish fishing and from float tube actually. So
catfish?
Pretty cool. Yeah, we can use Hobie, the cat from Felix. That's bait. You can use him as a streamer, man. Look how humongous hairy he is.
He'll probably eat all the fish coming up. He's a little bastard. Okay, guys, thank you for today. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and give us a comment or follow us on Instagram, Fish Podcast. Guys, see you next week. Thank you.
Yeah. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.